A new car for the price of a second-hand one is always a tempting prospect, and when it's as smartly styled and capable as Dacia's Duster, the concept becomes particularly appealing. Undercutting rival models in the crossover and small SUV 4x4 segments by an enormous amount, this Romanian budget brand uses proven Renault engineering to create a very likeable product that could prove ideal as backup family transport. Dig down the back of the sofa for some money and join the queue to try one. You're excused if you've never heard of Dacia. You pronounce it Dacia like the Russian chateau, and indeed Eastern Europe has long been the main market focus for this Romanian maker throughout an existence that stretches all the way back to 1966. Until 2012, Britain had been untroubled by the brand, apart from a brief and a particularly unsuccessful attempt to sell its awful rebodied Renault 12s here in the late 80s. But a lot's changed since then, most notably with Renault's takeover of the company in 1999, with the aim of replicating the Volkswagen Group's success with Skoda in building a budget brand. The French marque's master plan here has been to create a nameplate capable of taking Renault technology and using it in modern products that can be sold at quite astonishingly low prices. Cars like this one, the Dacia Duster. Older era Dacias were Renault models built under licence. Modern ones use unique Dacia design with Renault running gear under the skin. This particular car targeting the growing market for Qashqai-like crossover designs and Freelander-style compact 4x4s. Now, pricing for this type of vehicle typically tends to be anywhere between £17,000 and £30,000, depending on your preference. Figures way beyond the frankly amazing asking price for this Duster. Less than £10,000 gets you the entry-level version, with even this top-of-the-line diesel 4x4 variant costing 25% or more less than comparable rivals. Which would be irrelevant if cheap also meant nasty. But it doesn't. It can't. Dacia knows that the opposition can't get near its pricing, but it also knows that if the quality and execution of this product isn't up to snuff, then many potential buyers will rightly see a late low-mileage second-hand crossover or small 4x4 as a better bet. So, will that be true? Or will the UK's most affordable 4x4 be as impressive in practice as it is in price? Let's find out. Cut back on cost, and you also cut back on expectation. Admit it, you didn't think this Duster would be any good at all to drive. Well, if that's the case, then you might be surprised to learn that the consensus of market opinion in Europe, where this car has been on sale for some time, is that this Duster offers a ride and handling compromise capable of shaming rivals costing many thousands of pounds more. Indeed, some French, German and Italian writers have gone as far as to say that over broken surfaces, its ride is superior to that of a Land Rover Freelander. I don't think I'd go quite that far. After all, there's only so much you can do with a stretched, old generation Renault Clio floor plan and underpinnings. But if you were to jump into one of these from any sort of typical SUV, then it's unlikely that you'd feel significantly shortchanged. To be fair, small SUVs like Freelanders, Suzuki Grand Vitaras and the like don't set too high a dynamic standard for this Dacia to have to match. Qashqai-like crossovers, on the other hand, models that can get close to matching the ride and handling standards of the finest family hatches, well, they're a different story. This Duster won't feel like one of those. There's more body roll and the steering isn't as sharp. But for what it is, ride and handling is perfectly acceptable, especially for a vehicle that can do what no crossover could manage, and that's to give you decent off-road ability. That's if you opt for a 4x4 model, of course. Two-wheel drive is standard fare unless you pay the premium for an all-wheel driven variant like the one I have here. It's well worth considering. The extra cash gets you a proper Nissan-engineered selectable 3-mode system that's activated via the rotary controller down by the gear stick here. Now, most of the time you'll be in two-wheel drive, but when road conditions are wet or icy, there's the peace of mind of being able to switch to the auto setting, where all-wheel drive will cut in seamlessly as and when needed. When you're really mud plugging, then you'll want to switch to the lock mode to keep all the wheels turning continuously. Now, when you are in those types of conditions, you'll be glad of the 210 millimeters of ground clearance and the really very decent approach and departure angles of respectively 30 and 36 degrees. There's also a 23-degree ramp breakover angle. It's all enough to make quite a few allegedly more superior 4x4s look rather self-conscious. As for engines, well, you're probably not going to spend too long agonising over those because there's not much choice. Dacia launched the car here with a selection between just two, and in all probability you're only going to want one of those. Stripped out entry-level variants get a 105 brake horsepower 1.6 litre petrol unit that has to be read pretty hard to get anywhere near the quoted performance figures for the two-wheel drive version of 0 to 60 in 11.5 seconds on the way to 104 miles an hour. Most UK buyers will give this variant little more than a cursory glance on their way to sign up for the infinitely superior 110 brake horsepower 1.5 litre DCI diesel model that I'm driving here. Now, on paper, this diesel doesn't sound a lot faster. Rest to 60 takes 11.8 seconds in the two-wheel drive version and 12.5 seconds in the 4x4 model, on the way to a top speed that again is around 104 miles an hour. But in practice, in reality, there's all the difference in the world, thanks to an increase in pulling power of around 60% from 148 to 240 Newton meters. Now, this means that your Duster will have enough about it to haul itself up a steep slope or pull a trailer without feeling as if it's going to have an asthma attack. And in town, it'll mean that you won't have to row the car along with the gear lever, which is just as well, because the gear stick does have a long throw. All variants, bar the entry-level two-wheel drive petrol model, get a 6-speed gearbox, but you don't get an automatic option. As much as the price, I have a feeling that the shape is going to sell this Duster. The look isn't compact SUV generic, with a glass house that's shallower than some rivals, a kicked-up rear window line and a wheelbase that appears longer than it is. The handsome result gives this Dacia a clear look of its own, and the healthy amount of fresh air in the wheel arches suggests that even the two-wheel drive version would have a good go at tackling anything that the British countryside could throw at it. Draw up in one of these, and is anyone seriously going to think that you paid as much as half the normal asking figure for a car of this kind? I don't think so. Things are nothing like as modern under the skin, of course, but the underpinnings aren't too ancient, shared with designs as recent as Nissan's trendy Juke. They've also been strengthened to suit this Duster's possibly more arduous role in life. As have the interior fittings. At least that would probably be Dacia's explanation for the lack of soft-touch plastics and trendy interior design. And I suppose you could make a case for such a utilitarian approach being preferable, if this vehicle really is to serve as a go-anywhere, do-anything family workhorse. It all fits perfectly with the pared-back utility feel. At the wheel, you sit in front of a basic 2-dial instrument binnacle with orange LCD bar graphs for fuel level and temperature, and sit on seats that are very comfortable with good all-round vision, limited only by the upswept rearmost windows and the thick pillars. Of course, if you look for it, there are signs of cost-cutting. The electric window switches are on the centre console, for example. That makes the car easier and cheaper to produce for both left and right-hand drive markets. The stereo is a separate aftermarket style affair, and the steering wheel adjusts only for height, not for reach. All of which seems to be quite sensible if it really does cut down the cost of production, but in certain places the economies seem to be taken a little bit too far. Parts of the boot floor, for example, are poorly cut and badly finished, and the bare paint on this load area lip will quickly become gouged and scratched, something that could could have been avoided by a cheap plastic panel. Now, while we're back here, I should point out that the load area is actually a very decent size, 475 litres in this two-wheel drive model. That's a lot bigger than the 416 litres you get in a rival Skoda Yeti. If you go for the four-wheel drive version of this Duster, though, the one I've got here, the figure falls to 408 litres, courtesy of this proper full-size spare wheel. If you need more space, then pushing forward the rear bench, its only split-folding plusher versions, frees you up to 1,636 litres of fresh air. As for rear seat accommodation, well, there's actually more space here than you'd find in most compact 4x4s, with reasonable levels of head, leg and shoulder room for two, and on shorter journeys even for three. While the thought of owning a trendy compact SUV crossover style model for less than £10,000 may be the thing that gets people into Dacia showrooms, the car that satisfied prospective customers will end up driving out of them will probably require a very differently sized check, yet still one that'll net them a useful saving on models from comparable other brands. The reason why becomes clear when you take a closer look at what's on offer. The entry-level access specification Duster, after all, is the only one in the range that uses the older, rather noisy 105 brake horsepower 1.6 litre petrol engine that most will probably want to avoid. It might make sense as no-frills basic transport if all you want is that at super mini pricing. But aside from electric front windows, tinted glass, roof bars and remote locking with an immobiliser, its spec is rather Spartan. It doesn't even have a radio. It also has only two driven wheels, unless you pay a £2,000 premium for the four-wheel drive version. No, most buyers for this kind of car are going to need at least a few basic niceties. Bluetooth for your phone, body-coloured bumpers, a height-adjustable driver's seat and a split-folding rear bench, for example. Most are also going to want the 110 brake horsepower 1.5 litre DCI diesel that comes on all but entry-level Dusters. Mid-spec ambience trim level gives you all that at the £12,000 price point. And again, you can choose to add four-wheel drive if you want to for a £2,000 premium. You won't get air conditioning though, even as an option. The importers have tried to drive sales of the top Laureate trim level I have here by making these models the only ones in which the cabin can be properly chilled. At least the £1,500 premium that Laureate demands over the ambient spec also gives you niceties like alloy wheels, a trip computer and body colour for the mirrors and for the door handles. As with ambience, at this level, it's a diesel engine or nothing, and there's a choice of two or four-wheel drive. Still, Dacia's upsell strategy seems to work. Almost two-thirds of Duster buyers end up ignoring the shockingly affordable baseline pricing and treating themselves to Laureate trim, which, given that this will set you back no more than £13,000 to £15,000, is probably understandable. After all, for the cheapest, most sparsely equipped diesel version of this car's most obvious crossover segment rival, Skoda's Yeti, you're looking at finding, well, £3,500 more than the plushest diesel Duster. If you're comparing against the cheapest diesel version of a crossover like Nissan's Qashqai, then the difference is £5,500. And that car, bear in mind, has exactly the same 110 brake horsepower, 1.5 litre diesel engine. And of course, you can expect to almost double those premiums if you compare against the entry-level access-trimmed Duster models. As for comparisons with conventional Freelander or Toyota RAV4 style compact SUVs, well, forget them. For those, you're looking at a budget of £20,000 or so. Is there really anything else that can compare price-wise with this Duster? No, not really. Suzuki SX4 perhaps, but that's smaller, that's still pricier, and it's almost completely incapable of anything off-road. So has Dacia cut important corners to make this car so affordable? In safety perhaps? Well, no, not really. I normally criticise the absence of things like traction and stability control in newly launched models, but here it's excusable given the prices being asked, particularly since adding the package of these two items costs a very reasonable £350. And as standard, you do get twin front and side airbags, Isofix child seat fastenings and anti-lock brakes, plus a proper full-size spare wheel on 4x4 versions. It's a pity that front seatbelt pretensioners are limited to Laureate models though. As for options, well, apart from metallic paints and the ESC stability control system I've mentioned, there aren't many. Buyers though can choose between 4 affordably priced accessory packs branded Adventurer, Styling, Protection and Touring, which, as their names suggest, offer various body styling and protection items, plus useful touches like an alarm, rear parking sensors and a tow bar. Now you'll find this Duster not only cheap to buy, but similarly inexpensive to keep on the road. Both engines on offer are reasonably economical, if not exactly at the cutting edge of green technology. The two-wheel drive 1.6 litre petrol variant manages 39.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, but that figure does fall to 35.3 miles to the gallon if you go for the four-wheel drive variant. So if you had a two-wheel drive petrol model, you'd need to do about 15,000 miles or so before you were able to, if you like, pay for the cost of a set of winter tyres in pure fuel savings. Come to think of it though, that might actually work for a significant number of buyers. Emissions are 165 and 185 grams per kilometre of CO2 respectively for either two or four-wheel drive petrol variants. That means that if you go for four-wheel drive, it'll cost you probably about £45 a year more in tax. If you want me to put those figures into some kind of perspective for you, then I'll tell you that an entry-level diesel engine front-wheel drive Skoda Yeti with the same 105 brake horsepower from its petrol engine manages 44.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, but then you are paying £6,000 more for the privilege. As for the diesel models, like the one I'm driving here, well, you're looking at 56.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle for a two-wheel drive variant and 53.3 miles to the gallon for a four-wheel drive model. As for CO2 emissions, it's 130 grams per kilometre for the two-wheel drive diesel, 137 grams per kilometre for the four-wheel drive model. By driving down prices far lower than the competition, Dacia has effectively put a cap on depreciation, especially as the Renault source dealer network has a firm no discounting policy. It also helps that there's quite a healthy demand building for these cars that looks like it'll keep residual values buoyant for the foreseeable future. As for insurance, well, the petrol variant is rated on the 1 to 50 scale at Group 7, while for a diesel you're looking at Group 10. As for peace of mind, well, Dacia has chosen to cock a snook at the Koreans by choosing, and I quote, not to force buyers to have to pay for a longer warranty that they might not want. You may not agree, but if you don't, then at least you've got the option to extend the standard 3-year 60,000 mile package with an affordably priced 5 or 7-year warranty. So, to the bottom line. New cars are often a lot more expensive than perhaps they need to be, especially in trendy market sectors like that for crossover compact 4x4s. It's a trend manufacturers often try and justify with high technology that's certainly very impressive, but which many potential buyers neither appreciate nor really want. These are the people being targeted here by a very clever package that gives you almost everything you need and nothing you don't. The things it can't offer, cutting-edge handling, a soft-touch trendy cabin and high-tech equipment levels, become irrelevant when you consider the asking price. A figure that in 4x4 models buys you muddy capability that will shame that of some rivals costing twice as much. And whatever Duster you choose, you'll find it smartly styled, practically finished and affordable to run. Enough to make it a good alternative to a late low mileage second-hand crossover 4x4 rival? Many will think so. All of which begs the question, will you be one of those who constantly pays over the odds for a car of this kind, justifying things with notions of brand loyalty and high technology? Or, as Dacia suggests, is it time to take a different, more realistic approach? It's a convincing argument.